Pozole. When you think about folklore, you don't often think about the food aspects. But foodways are a very important part of folklore that helps us connect to our past and experience new cultures. For my project, I interviewed my mom, Carmen, a tradition bearer born in Michoacan, Mexico, who moved to the US when she was 13, currently residing in Valparaiso, Indiana. What we are discussing today is the tradition of making red pozole. Red pozole originated with the Aztecs in present day Mexico and has evolved in many ways from the process of making it to removing certain ingredients like human flesh. But now, my mom makes it in her home kitchen. When it comes to making pozole, it's often reserved for special occasions like the holidays. But why does she make it? Well, for us, pozole represents family, the convivo, and love for the kitchen. One of the key aspects of folklore is transmission, how a tradition is passed from one person to another. My mother didn't learn this from a cookbook or a YouTube video. She learned it directly from tradition bearers, those being her own mother and grandmother. When I asked how she was taught, she explained it wasn't explicit instruction. She wasn't given a recipe to write down. Instead, she acquired the knowledge through observation and participation in the kitchen. By the time she was 6, she was making meals for herself and others. When she was 15, the tradition of making pozole for the holidays started. Because she learned by watching, she cooks entirely by memory and feel. She knows the recipe is right, not by measuring, but the smell of the kitchen, the look of the ingredients, and the taste of her creations. In my family, we always say that one can follow a recipe, but not everyone is able to cook. They do not have the hands to do so, or in other words, the talent to create. This is a classic oral tradition which my mother now hopes to pass onto her children, especially her only daughter, continuing the lineage of active tradition bearers. The process of making the dish is labor intensive. It involves boiling water, meat, onion, garlic, and hominy for hours. After the pot has been cooking for a while, she prepares the sauce by blending guajillo chiles with garlic and oregano. This thick smoothie of sorts is then put in a strainer, where she dips into the pot, spewing out spices into the broth. Once she's done straining the spices out of this smoothie, she proceeds to cook it, and it's ready by the time the guests arrive. One of the things about folklore is that it's ever changing and evolving. Living in the United States has introduced what folklorists call force of change. For example, in Mexico, corn requires a long preparation process called nixtamalization. But here in Indiana, my mother has adopted the recipe to include pre-canned hominy due to the process being tedious and having difficulty finding the ingredients here in Indiana. She has also embraced newer technologies into the recipe, like using a blender instead of a matete, like her grandmother used to do, to save time. Folklore also involves aesthetics, the standards of quality and beauty within a tradition. I asked my mother what makes a good pozole versus a bad one. To her, the aesthetic quality comes down to three things: the meat, the flavor, and most of all, the toppings. The first two are the most important, because no amount of toppings can save a bad pozole. The garnish is what ties the bowl with the addition of new flavors and the presentation of the dish. Without the garnishing, the aesthetic experience is incomplete. When it comes to bad red pozole, an example immediately came to my mother's mind. It was when my mother and the rest of us were at a kid's birthday party in Mexico. My siblings were excited for some pozole, but when it came out, you would have believed that it was white pozole. In my mother's words, it was basically corn and water, no color, no flavor. She tried a few spoonfuls, and then she said she was full, so she wouldn't have to eat it. It went against everything that makes a good pozole. The worst part of the story is that the lady who made it is said to make one of the best pozoles in the town. Just because it originates from Mexico does not mean that anyone in Mexico can make such a culturally impactful dish. Ultimately, this interview revealed that making pozole is more than just feeding the family or just making a dish. It's a performance of identity and care, connecting us to the past and future. When I asked my mom if there was a secret ingredient, her answer wasn't a spice or an ingredient. It was attitude, patience, and in her own words.
So basically, love to the kitchen.
Through this project, I documented how a tradition from Michoacan has found its place in Indiana, surviving through adaptation, memory, and a mother's patience. Thank you for watching.